Love you. Hello, hello, and welcome to Medieval Monday. This is Season 1, Episode 5, The Rise of the Papacy. Or, as the title screen said, all about them popes. I am Michael Fay Vitale, also known as the Wombat. I host this live stream every Monday night. It does contain language and situations that may be considered inappropriate for younger or sensitive ears, so that is your warning. Tonight we're going to be talking about the rise of the popes, starting with the first bishop of Rome, the first bishop of Rome, all the way to Gregory I, about 603 years later. This episode is going to have to be split into multiple different branches simply because the history of the papacy is huge, and I'm only doing this for an hour. Hey, babe. Yes, I am live. Yay! Did you get the notification this time? Okay. So normally I wait until some people are in the room, but this is, like I said, going to take a while, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. If you're watching this on the replay, here we go. If you're live, well, yeah. Okay, so the very position of Pope, according to the Catholic Church, is that they are a successor to St. Peter. St. Peter, also known as Simon in the Bible, was an apostle of Christ, who was also the one that Christ said, "You will deny me 3 times." Let's see. He was first among the 12 apostles. He was the first pope, although he was never actually called pope. He was called the first bishop of Rome. The Eastern Orthodox... Okay, let me see this. Okay, this is St. Peter. He's a holy, devout-looking guy there. Most probably famously known for St. Peter's Basilica, which is in Vatican City in Rome. Yes, Catholics say that Peter was the first pope. However, back then they didn't call him pope. He was just the first bishop of Rome. That's the Roman Catholics. The Eastern Orthodox believe that he has a special place, but considered that he has a special place and is considered primacy, but he has no right to exercise pastoral authority. And the Protestants, buddy Martin Luther there, they believe that his work does not imply a connection between him and the actual papacy. So they do not believe he has ecumenical authority to basically rule over all the other priests. Okay, so we'll get rid of those. All right. So St. Peter was martyred. He was crucified, an inverted crucifixion, which means he was upside down. And Catholics believe that the site of his crucifixion is by the Clementine Chapel, which is next to St. Peter's Basilica in the grottos, and he's actually buried in St. Peter's tomb. Hello, hello. Hi, Miss Kelly. Hi, Step Outside. It's going pretty well. We're talking about popes, and way long ago. So we're talking 0 CE, right after the crucifixion of Christ. It says in Matthew in the Bible, and this is what Catholics say is the reason that that Peter was the leader of the church. As Christ tells Peter, quote, "I tell you that you are Peter, and And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not overcome it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. This is seen as giving him authority over the church and giving him the primacy over all other cardinals, priests, bishops as they came along. Let's see. Once we get away from there, we start talking about sort of the first 300 years of the papacy. The papacy, we really don't know a lot about it. We know that quite a few of those popes were martyred along with their followers during periods of persecution, and we know that they struggled against sort of the non-acceptance of Christianity as a faith. It wasn't until about 312 when the Emperor Constantine was an emperor. He was a Frank, and during the night before the Battle of Milivan Bridge, Constantine, who is here, he had a vision where in the sky he witnessed the Chi-Rho. This is one of the earliest forms of the Christian symbols, along with the words and blazes "In hoc signo vinces," which means "in God victorious." He had all of his soldiers paint the symbol and the words on their shields, and the next day they were victorious. It was the next year that Constantine put out the Edict of Milan, which put out a system of tolerance for Christianity within the kingdom. So, as we see the persecution of Christians stop and the growth of acceptance for Christianity, then we start to see the formation of the modern idea of what the Christian religion is. This definitely starts to come about in 325 CE, which was the first Council of Nicaea. It was the first ecumenical council held. Strangely, the Pope, who was Damasus, did not attend. He didn't want anything to do with Constantine. 324, which is probably why in 325 the Pope didn't want anything to do with him. Between 324 and 330, Constantine moved the seat of the Holy Roman Empire from Rome to Byzantine, which then in 330 he renames Constantinople. This forms the Eastern Roman Catholic Church. Underneath the Constantinian rule, things go well for a while. The church grows. It's still growing in Rome. And then we have pretty much this sort of level playing field for the emerging church, along with the Arian sort of religions, and that's Arian, not Aryan. That type of Arian is not a thing. Okay. We end up getting what's called the Donation of Constantine. The Donation of Constantine was a forgery. That there first, but what it did, it was it enhanced the prestige and the authority of the popes, and it places the Pope as the central, more centrally in the narrative of the Christian religion. You're on the Psalms. Nice. It's a decent book. This continues on with the church gaining power until about 493, when the Ostrogothics. These are the Ostrogothics, not these type of Gothics. Keep in mind, these, not these. Okay. The Ostrogothics form their own kingdom. Well, they don't really form their own kingdom. Hello, sir! The Ostrogoths form their own... They take over Rome. And in Rome, they end up choosing a new pope. And they choose Pope Symmachus, who is then quickly followed by a rival group within the bishops of the anti-pope look at my notes. Anti-pope Laurentius. I would have a picture of him, but I can't find any, strangely. Even all the sites that talk about him don't have pictures of him. So this is in 498 when Pope Symmachus is elected and the anti-pope is elected as well. What happens is they go to Theodoric, who is Theodoric the Great, who is the king of the Ostrogoths, and he rules in Symmachus's favor. Now, what happens shortly after that, because it's politics, and that's what happens in this type of thing, is that Laurentius's followers go to King Theodoric and say, Symmachus won because he bribed everybody. And it's pretty much the truth. It is the first case of simony in the church. And simony is a biblical term which means paying for religious offices and positions. It comes from Simon Magnus, who was accused and convicted of selling off administrative positions. So Theodoric goes, well, that's not cool. And he calls Symmachus to come to court and explain himself. And instead of Symmachus going to court and explaining himself, he runs away to Rome and hides in St. Peter's Basilica. This place. He gets charged with not appearing, which is a thing. And Theodoric goes, well, okay, so Laurentius, you're actually the new pope. So Laurentius comes back to Rome, and he rules as pope for 4 years until Symmachus's followers come out of hiding and say, no, this isn't right, and more politics. And Theodoric goes, nope, we were right. Symmachus is the pope. So Symmachus then becomes pope again. This is just an example of sort of how political the office of the pope is and can be. Hello. And it continues to be this way throughout the medieval period, the Renaissance, early modern, and so forth. If you believe that the office of the Pope is no longer political, that's not what history tells us. So, the Ostrogoths continued to have power in Rome until the Byzantines came in with Justinian the First. Justinian the First is this dude right here. That's my face. Justinian came in, and with him came the Byzantine Empire, which is still Constantinople, which then later became Istanbul. And why did they change it? Nobody knows. I guess the Turks just liked it better that way. Sorry, that was bad. Okay, so Constantinople comes in. Justinian the First lays down the law, and he says that from this point forward, the popes will be chosen not by successor, not by the popes themselves, but by the emperor. And yeah, I'm going to choose who the pope is going to be. And he chooses the next 3 popes. Keep this in mind. This is one person going through 3 popes. I'm 41 at 42, and I've only been alive for 3 popes. So it kind of cycles through quickly. So none of the popes really have a problem with this, except for Pope Martin I. Pope Martin I decides that he doesn't like the way Justinian is handling things, and he holds up in Rome. And they come and get him and take him to Constantinople. And he answers in the only way that they dealt with answers back then. Creepy squirrel? What? No, that's Maurice. He's my medieval squirrel. There, is he cuter from that side? Okay. So what we've looked at so far is the birth of the papacy in the years right following Christ's death. One of his apostles, Simon, or Peter, ends up becoming the first among equals. He becomes the head of the apostolic order. Oh, hurt his feelings. He becomes the head of the apostolic, I hate that word, order, and becomes the first bishop of Rome, which later is what the Pope is, Papa. They continue on for 300 years with a bunch of popes that die a lot. We don't really know a lot about them. It is a very ostracized and persecuted religion until we get to Constantine, who sees the Chi-Rho and gives legitimacy to the Christian faith. Then we start to see the formation of what we know as sort of modern day Christianity or Catholicism, with the Council of Nicaea and the formation of the ecumenical councils. The Ostrogoths, not those Goths, these Goths. They end up taking over Rome, and they hold Rome and the Pope, the papacy, until Justinian comes. So we go into a new Byzantine era, with the Emperor of Rome, which is in Constantinople, not in Rome, choosing the popes, choosing how the church runs, and being controlled by the emperor. We have one pope who speaks out. He doesn't end well. Then we move on to 590 when we get to Pope Gregory I. And Pope Gregory I is where we're going to be spending most of our time tonight. So Pope Gregory I, let me get a picture of him, is this guy. And Pope Gregory is known, he was the son of a senator in Rome, and he was the prefect of Rome by the age 30. He ended up going into monastic orders and was going to spend the rest of his life being a monk, which back then was actually a pretty sweet gig. You were educated, you lived in relative comfort. I mean, you had food, you usually had beer, you had comforts that a lot of like regular illiterate peasants didn't. You also got to do things like write in books and draw and ponder things that aren't, how am I going to survive the next day? So as much as we look at the monastic orders and we go, wow, you lived in a monastery, and yeah, it's probably actually kind of sweet compared to today. All right. So one of the biggest things that Gregory is known for is the creation of missionaries. right? So the idea of missionaries that we see today that go to other countries to proselytize actually comes from Pope Gregory back in 590. That's my dogs. Okay. So he was Pope from 590 to 604, so 14 years. And in 14 years, Pope Gregory managed to do more for Christianity and Catholicism than any other pope before him probably combined. His first big mission, so the Gregorian missionaries, their goal was to go to England. I don't think it was actually called England back then, but and convert the pagan Anglo-Saxons to Christianity. They ran into their first big problem when realizing that when you're in Rome and England's over here, you have like France and Spain and other stuff to go through by land, which was safer than going up the water. So they had to work on getting that taken care of first. I just totally went blank. That's why I have notes. Okay. So, over the course of 14 years, Pope Gregory I, also known as Pope Gregory the Great, managed to not only organize the church in a way no other pope had been able to before, but he also managed to get the Franks, the Lombards, and the Visigoths not these guys. Not those guys either. I don't have a picture of the Visigoths. The difference between Visigoth and Ostrogoth is one is north, one is south. That's all. He got the Franks, the Lombards, and the Visigoths to align with Rome in religion. So he just managed to get within 14 years a whole swath of Europe under the rule of him. It's impressive for a time period when people didn't even have telephones or mail. That's very cool stuff. Yeah, so a lot of the stuff that comes up, especially about the early papacy, is not pretty and not really flattering to the Catholic Church. So a lot of it isn't talked about. The first 300 years of the papacy is really not talked about because it is sort of brutal and violent, and the office of the first bishop of Rome or the Pope didn't have a lot of legitimacy because it just was a chaotic time. As we move, like I said, into Pope Gregory I, we're going to see next week, we're going to actually see sort of the emergence of the modern day Catholic religion. A lot of the ritual and a lot of the esoteric elements of Christianity, of Catholicism and even Eastern Orthodox come from Pope Gregory the Great. In fact, he is even known as the father of Christian worship. And he is Eastern Orthodox communion. They have the ritual of Gregory, I think is what it's called. It has another name, but which is actually straight from Gregory I. So he managed to unite most of Europe. He did this the way that anyone is united. There were swords involved, lots of bloodshed involved, but he was one of the ones that said that a just war is a good war. And the idea of a just war, not like it's just a war, but just as in right. A just war is one that is given with God's permission, one that is given with the blessing of the Pope, and one that is given to be righteous and holy, with all things considering. So wholesale slaughter, all of it was okay because it was a just war. This is another part that any religion that's been around for a while, they have a tendency to leave out the sort of birth pains that are violent and usually covered in blood. There is a reason that England fought for so long against sort of the Christian incursion and the Catholic incursion, which you would think that, oh, well, hey, look, they became, Catholic. And in the end, they did, but we also have sort of the formation of the Anglican Church. What Rome wanted and what Rome wanted to control, England has never really sat well with that. They want to be able to divorce and behead their wives. That's, just a thing. Maybe it was just one guy. It was Henry. It was definitely Henry. The Tudors. It's a pretty good TV show. Even better in history. Okay. Sorry. Back to Gregory. So he is known as the patron saint of musicians, singers, students, and teachers. He was responsible for pushing education. He was responsible for emphasizing the arts when at a time that stuff really didn't matter or exist a whole lot. There were singers, but they were like choir type singing, not quite to the Renaissance yet with the castrati and all these amazing things, but there were people who would basically sing the verses and the hymns out loud. Students and teachers, that's all within the church. The idea of a school where kids go to school and they learn that, no, not unless you were in the church. You basically, if you weren't in the church, you were either a soldier, a peasant, a noble, and you learned how to fight or farm or make shoes. Whatever trade your father was in was probably going to be the trade that you were in. It's just how things were. Excuse me. Let me see what else we got here. He was the father of the Gregorian tradition within the Catholic Church. So anytime the Gregorian chants, that's that guy. The Gregorian calendar, that's that guy. The Gregorian missions, that's that guy. He was that influential within the Catholic Church. He is cited as Pope Gregory I, Pope Gregory the Great, Pope Gregory the Most Excellent, the Pope among popes, the first among popes, the first among Rome, the first great missionary, the first warrior against paganism. He has a lot of names. What are we doing? 30 minutes? Okay. Didn't take nearly as long as I thought to get through most of it. All right. Excuse me. Let's see. We got... Okay. Let's get Pope Gregory off the screen here. All right. Now, so when we look at history, we have to look at history from the point of view of that time period. We have a bad habit, historians do it too, of looking at history through the lens of the present day. So when we look at the early Catholic Church and we see the violence and the blood and the war and the politics and the bribery, and it's very easy to say they were bad. They were politically manipulative and bad. However, it is more likely that that was the only way for the church to survive at the time. And if the church didn't survive, then we wouldn't have Catholicism today, or we wouldn't have Christianity in the form that we have it today. And there are those out there who argue that we shouldn't. But once again, they are looking at one side of the coin. They are looking at only what they want to see. So, when in history, you have to take into account the context of things. The idea of a just war today is horrible, right? That's something we label with people that we consider the enemies of everything that we believe. Because a just war and jihad, it's both a struggle against opposition. So I am trying to, a lot of this stuff, especially when we get into this, I'm trying to wrap my head around it still too. I'm learning with you guys. And one of the things that really sort of interested me reading was the sheer amount of time involved. By the time we get to Pope Gregory, 600 years has passed. It's been, that was in 600, so what, 1,300 years? It's been, that was 1,300 years ago. That's right? Math, it's hard. The sheer amount of time that has been invested in the church and history. Yes, I will definitely post the replay. Thank you for coming by. Bye, Steph. I'll definitely check out your channel, too. I don't think I've seen you in one of my streams before. Okay. Sorry, I got sidetracked. So, I need to take a second to breathe here, because, yeah, I talked a lot. If you guys have any questions, I'll be paying attention to the chat for a second and just rambling on about my own thoughts. The sheer amount of time that has passed since the papacy first came about, just it boggles my mind. I can come to grips with sort of like 1095, 1200, 1400, 1500, because in my mind that doesn't seem that long ago. I know it's 900 and something years, but like I was reading today, and it was, so you have sort of year 0 is Christ's birth, right? According to records. Well, not records, according to Christianity. So 32 years later, Christ is crucified. So that's when we get sort of this start of the church, right? It is in supposedly Rome where it is everything starts. You see the persecution of the apostles afterwards, where this is where Peter denies Christ 3 times. One, a washerwoman says, yes, he was with Christ, and he goes, no, I wasn't. Another time he's accused because he has a Galilean accent, and he says, no, I wasn't. And then another time he's seen with 3 of the other apostles, and they go, well, he's obviously an apostle. And he goes, no, I wasn't. How somebody, and I'm sure it's a part of the religion that I don't understand, how somebody that denied Christ 3 times became the first bishop of Rome, I don't know. That's something I didn't dig that deep into. But it was Peter and Paul that sort of formed the church. Peter was chosen to be the first among the 12 apostles and the first bishop of Rome. Let's see. The Battle of Milivan Bridge is actually really interesting to me. So whether or not Constantine actually had a vision or was convinced some other way that Christianity was the path. Excuse me. That Christianity was the path towards victory is questionable. For hundreds and hundreds of years, the story of the vision is held as what happened. Nobody's argued it, so that is sort of, he had a dream, and in that dream he dreamed that Christ was the way to win the battle. This does not mean that Constantine became a Christian overnight. He didn't. He used the symbology of Christianity to give morale to his soldiers, which a lot of sort of smaller beliefs, smaller religions often start in the soldier, in the ranks. Well, they don't start, but they're carried on by the soldiers, especially when a lot of your soldiers at a year before were farmers or rural or something like that. So it may have been just a way for a morale boost for his soldiers, if the majority of them already believed in Christianity. It may have been a divine sign. I don't know. I'm not personally prone to believe that, but stranger things have happened. The Edict of Milan is definitely where we see Christianity becoming a religion and not just a fringe group of people who worshipped Christ, where we see them establish a foothold strong enough that they can spread the word of their faith without worry of being killed or slaughtered or anything else. We often think that Christianity sprang up overnight, and it didn't, right? So the first 300 years of Christianity was almost non-existent. It was very sketchy there for a bit. A lot of times Romans would go in and completely slaughter entire sects of Christians. I do find it interesting that the Council of Nicaea, which set forth sort of the ecumenical rules of Christianity, Catholicism, I know they're two different things, but they don't, in historical context, they were Christians. Isn't really until 1500 that sort of there's this split. Well, I mean, so you had, okay, so that's what I'm talking about. So the first Council of Nicaea is where the first Great Schism happens. And the first Great Schism happens when you have the Romans and the Eastern Orthodox. At one time, they were the same church. And everything is hunky-dory. And then all of a sudden, the Pope, well, he's given primacy. He is the head of the church, the voice of God. He is the successor to St. Peter. And you have the Eastern Orthodox who go, wait a minute. Wait. Okay. So yes, he has primacy. Yes, he is the first among equals, but that's just what he is. He is the first among equals. He is not the voice of God. He is not sort of this messenger on high. He is not necessarily the successor of Peter. He's just the first bishop of Rome. And that tore the two churches apart. And that's just the first schism. We see schisms later and later and later, and then in 1500 we have this guy. He's a chummy looking fellow. This is Martin Luther. Martin Luther in 1500 is having a few beers with friends and sees what he sees as things that the Roman Catholic Church are doing wrong, writes them all down, marches to a church in Germany, and nails those things to the front door, his protests. So he became the Protestant. So the Protestants, which is effectively any group that is not Catholic, is a Protestant group. Now that Protestant group has broken into hundreds of different denominations. Episcopalian, Baptist, Southern Baptist, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. There have been so many schisms and shatterings within the church structure that it's a little crazy. Alright, am I coming through okay? The chat kind of calmed down. Oh, well, there's only one viewer. Okay, never mind. Leave him up there. He's got a friendly face. So that is sort of the early history of the papacy. Next week we'll be talking from the end of Gregory into sort of the proper medieval period. And moving on, we're just going to we'll finish up right around the start of the Renaissance, which is the Medici period. So I'm figuring probably 2 more episodes. If the other one goes as fast as this one, it might be 2 episodes. I don't know. I thought I had more than enough notes to go an hour. I guess I talk fast. So I don't know who's in the room still, because I'm on XSplit and not on YouTube. But thank you for hanging around, baby. So I was going to end it with a question and answer session, but yeah. Good times. All right, so that's pretty much all I got for tonight. So next week at 8 p.m. we'll be talking about the continuation of the papacy, and we'll move on from here and see where that leads us. So that's all I got. And until we talk again, you're the internet. I'm the Wombat. Have a great time. Bye, guys.